It's day 65. It's also July 9th, 2019. And we are in Rufus, Oregon. You ever wake up in the morning and ask yourself, what am I doing? And more importantly, why? Yeah, me too. Hi, my name is Craig, and this is my story. A story about life out there. For visuals while listening, search Life Out There on your favorite social media platform or use the links in the podcast description. It's been a busy couple of weeks. From Coburg, we would do a bit of backtracking, another quick stop in Bremerton to enjoy more of the summertime weather, and spend the 4th of July holiday in good old B-Town. First up, we'd be spending the day at the annual Bremerton Bridge Blast. The Bridge Blast is an exciting 4th of July celebration that takes place on the Manette Bridge in Bremerton. The Manette Bridge, which spans the Port of Washington Narrows, connects East and West Bremerton across the channel. Organizers put together an impressive fireworks show which they claim is the largest display from a bridge on the West Coast. Approximately $35,000 worth of fireworks light up the skies above the Manette Bridge starting at around 10:15 p.m. Thousands of people gather in the entire area to witness a spectacular display. Spectators can view the show from various locations around the area, including the Lewis Mentor Boardwalk and the Bremerton Marina. The event is loaded with opportunities for great food while exploring the quaint community of Manette. Other highlights included an air show featuring Vicky Benzing, a record-setting air racer. Joining her were 3 other aerobatic experts, including Will Allen, known as the Rock and Roll Air Show Man. He was a pretty cool show in that he combines incredible flying skills with live music. Kind of hard to explain, but definitely check both these two out on YouTube. It was fun to watch. While back in Bremerton, I also took the time to pick up the new digital antenna and cell signal booster for the RV. Also pretty excited to replace the house batteries with a new set of deep cycle batteries. Needed to get all set up for all the boondocking I plan on doing. Our last day in town was spent getting things washed up, RV and car both, some adjustments to the tow dolly just in time to hit the road cross country. For real this time. From Bremerton, this time it was back out to I-5 north to Portland and then east into the Columbia River Gorge. Along the banks of the Columbia River, about 110 miles east of Portland, we found the Rufus Landing Recreation Center. Finally, our first boondocking opportunity and adventure. And we'd end up spending several days here watching the comings and goings of the windsurfing community and exploring the incredible scenery and history of this area. But first, a little about Rufus and the surrounding area. Rufus itself is a small community in Sherman County nestled between Interstate 84 and the basalt cliffs of the beautiful Columbia River Gorge. The area was settled in the late 1860s primarily as a railroad stop. Ferry rides across the river were quickly established to support increasing traffic in the area, and it wouldn't be long before a post office would be established. The town was named after Rufus Carroll Wallace, one of the area's earliest settlers, but surprisingly would not be incorporated as a city until 1965. The Columbia River Gorge itself is an incredible river canyon that stretches for over 80 miles along the Columbia River as it winds through the Cascade Mountain Range. The canyon is up to 4,000 feet deep in spots, creating a breathtaking landscape of cliffs, spires, and ridges. The gorge also serves as the boundary between Washington to the north and Oregon on its south side. The gorge itself was formed some 12 to 17 million years ago. Formation began during the Miocene period, a period of significant volcanic activity. As I look at the gorge today and read about the geological processes that formed it, all I could think was, man, How amazing would it have been to be able to watch this happen? And even as I thought it, as you probably guessed, I realized I probably could. Sure enough, quick check on YouTube, and so much to choose from. I started with a video called Forged Through Time, the creation of the Columbia River Gorge. It's worth a watch if you're into that sort of thing. The gorge, and the entire Columbia River Basin in general, was formed over the course of millions of years. It's crazy to think that some 35 million years ago, long before the existence of humans, magnolia blossoms, fig trees, avocados, crocodiles, rhinos, giraffes, camels, even saber-toothed tigers and woolly mammoths would roam what at the time was a place of high plateaus and palm groves. Eventually, all would fall victim to dramatic changes in their environment and be wiped away from the landscape, many of which never to return. Periods of massive lava flows from the volcanic activity creating basalt layers combined with the land sinking and creating depressions, along with tectonic forces causing fractures and faults, all come together and repeat themselves over millions of years. And if that were not enough forces of nature, throw in the fact that simultaneously the Cascade Mountain Range was being shoved up through the landscape by immeasurable forces from below. Today, the Cascade Mountain Range has an average elevation of 5,000 feet with peaks just over 10,000 feet. Some of the most dramatic shifts in landscape would take place when ice sheets formed due to the increases in elevation and shifts in climate causing dramatic geological events. Multiple events occurred when the ice dams that had formed further inland in areas we now call Idaho and Montana would fail. At one point in time, there was a body of water in Montana larger than Lake Erie and Lake Michigan combined. An ice dam failure caused flooding of epic proportion, almost beyond comprehension. The flood would move through the entire valley with such force that the landscape would be permanently reshaped. The sea levels would increase an estimated 200 to 300 feet in the Pacific Ocean nearly overnight. This activity shaped most of the Oregon and Washington coastline as we see it today. It's also crazy to think about the fact that basalt boulders that we may look at today at one time could have very likely been located in Idaho or Montana. Millions of years of evolution lead us to what we look at today when exploring the Columbia River Gorge, an area that holds the largest concentration of waterfalls on the North American continent. It's also an area through which over 260,000 square miles of land evacuate water west of the Continental Divide out to the Pacific Ocean. Over 17.5 trillion gallons of water is pumped into the Pacific Ocean at Astoria, Oregon via the Columbia River, making it the largest runoff of water anywhere in the North American continent. It's also one of the reasons the area is commonly referred to as the Graveyard of the Pacific, a true testament to the river's force and its ability to prevent passage by even the largest of today's ships. The term Graveyard of the Pacific dates back to the late 1800s when Euro-American explorers first discovered the deadly combination of rugged coastline, unpredictable weather patterns, and the sheer force of the Columbia River entering the Pacific Ocean. Several tragedies, right up through modern day, have kept the name alive, along with a few legends about ghost ships haunting the area after a failed attempt at passage. In spite of decades of documentation and warning, the area around the Columbia River and the Pacific Ocean is the scene of some of the most dramatic Coast Guard rescues in modern history. Do a quick YouTube search for Cape Disappointment and Coast Guard, and you'll get tons of examples of wayward mariners in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's also an opportunity to see how incredible the U.S. Coast Guard men and women are at what they do. And right up through today, the Columbia River continues to carve its way through history, persistently and patiently, revealing more and more of the past with each passing year. The constant rumblings of nearby Mount St. Helens and Mount Rainier remind us that the evolution continues. Just inland from the coast and up through where we are today, archaeological evidence shows us that indigenous peoples crossed the Bering Land Bridge from Asia around 15,000 years ago. Evidence of their presence can be found dating back 11,000 years at Marm's Rock Shelter in Washington State. Indications are that they arrived shortly after that in the gorge. The area's abundance of fish, game, and foliage provided a rich life for the tribes, living along the shores of the river and crafting canoes for fishing on the river. The tribes developed strong bonds with the land, living in peace with it and the surrounding tribes for thousands of years, even developing strong trade practices among the tribes. In 1792, Robert Gray and George Vancouver would be amongst the first European-American explorers to reach the area. Gray would trade with the Chinookan people near the river's mouth, while Vancouver explored farther upstream, mapping the river. Fur traders would follow, relying on the indigenous communities for knowledge of the river and its resources. Soon after, the Hudson's Bay Company would establish Fort Vancouver near what is present-day Portland. In 1802, the Lewis and Clark expedition would discover the area coming in from the east, introducing the area to the fledgling United States. In the coming years, the river would remain a natural highway for the area as American settlers introduced steamships to the river, linking communities along it. Later in the 19th century, railway routes would supplement travel up and down the banks of the river, helping to grow the population throughout the area. White settlers had just begun to migrate south a bit into the Willamette Valley when in the late 1860s gold was discovered in Idaho. This would cause an influx of gold seekers into and through the area from all directions. This would begin the focus on commerce through the region. To this point, the river had been the main form of transportation, supplemented by limited railway and steamship activity. The area in general was extremely rugged, in some areas treacherous. Figuring out ways to blaze trails, tunnel, and install bridges in the area would prove to be a true test of the technology of the time. But the persistence and ingenuity and backbreaking, sometimes life-threatening work they would put in would introduce new technologies and begin the transformation of the area into what it is today. Among some of the more notable accomplishments, the historic Columbia River Highway, the first scenic highway built in the United States. The first section of the highway opened in 1916, with the entire project reaching completion in 1922. The route would include the Mitchell Tunnel, an engineering marvel for its time. The engineers of the tunnel were inspired by the roadways of Europe, in particular a three-windowed tunnel in Switzerland. Their inspiration resulted in a five-window Mitchell Tunnel. The concept of carving out windows in the side of the tunnel would open up scenic vistas all along the 395-foot-long tunnel. The highway was 73 miles in length, and its construction would be met by nearly every obstacle Mother Nature could throw at it. Bridges, tunnels, byways, viaducts, and walls were all required to traverse the rugged landscapes. With automobile traffic being relatively young at the time, the highway drew visitors from around the world simply to revel in the scenic beauty and the engineering feats that the King of Highways had provided. For decades, the Columbia River Highway would be referred to as America's most beautiful highway. Next up, the Bridge of the Gods. The Bridge of the Gods is a steel truss cantilever bridge that spans the Columbia River between the Cascade Locks in Oregon and Washington State near North Bonneville. The bridge opened to the public in 1926 with a span of 1,127 feet. Construction of the Bonneville Dam would raise the river levels, which required the bridge to be further elevated in 1940, which extended it to its current length of 1,856 feet. Another engineering feat for the time. Watching videos of the bridge's construction will give you a ton of respect for the work these guys took on, and the conditions they worked under. During the 8 months of the bridge's construction, rowboats would patrol below the bridge each day just in case. After completion, one of the rowboat operators stated proudly that he had waited 8 months to be a hero. but all he got was the occasional hot rivet, documenting the fact that even under those working conditions, bridge workers balanced on steel beams 90 feet in the air without safety harnesses or being tied in, I might add, and yet there were no records or reports of any injuries. And finally, Bridge of the Gods, where did that name come from? It's actually a Native American term that was given to a major geological event estimated to have taken place in the mid-1400s. A massive landslide occurred, known as the Bonneville Slide. The event took place what is near Cascade Locks, Oregon. The landslide originated from nearby Table Mountain on the north shore of the Columbia River. As a result of this significant slide, debris covered an area more than 5.5 square miles in size. The debris slid into the Columbia River Gorge, effectively blocking the river's flow and creating a natural dam approximately 200 feet high and 3.5 miles long. The impounded river formed a lake submerging a forest of trees for about 35 miles. Native Americans would call this naturally formed dam the Bridge of the Gods. Their gods had provided them safe passage across the mighty river without even getting their feet wet. But in time, even the Earth's own geological forces would not be able to contain the Columbia River. The dam would eventually breach, washing away most of the debris, leaving the area now known as the Cascade Falls. Now let's go back to the Bonneville Dam. The dam is situated about 40 miles inland from Portland and spans the river between Oregon and Washington state. Construction of the dam began in 1932, and the project was completed in 1937. The engineers and thinkers of the time had realized the importance of the gorge and potential as a major player in moving commerce from the West Coast inland to the Midwest, and then on to the East Coast. The dam was constructed with two major purposes in mind. First, it would facilitate safe navigation for ships and vessels through the area. It would also be a source for electrical power generation. A second powerhouse was completed in 1981, which means today the dam generates hydroelectric power, contributing significantly to the region's energy needs. Flood control would be an additional benefit if needed. The dam is a concrete gravity dam with a run-of-the-river design. Run-of-the-river means that the dam was designed to have zero effect on the natural flow of the river. The dam stands 171 feet high and has a span of 2,690 feet, and is 132 feet wide at its base. Installation of the dam created Lake Bonneville, which has a total capacity of 537 acre-feet. The catchment area for the dam covers an impressive 260,000 square miles. During its construction in the 30s, the dam was the largest water impoundment project of its kind in the United States. The dam also received recognition as a National Historic Landmark in 1987. Today, the dam remains a critical component in providing clean energy to the folks that call the Pacific Northwest home, and is considered a testament to the feats of human engineering. Man, that's a lot of engineering technology and, more importantly, a ton of hard work and sweat poured into this 80-mile stretch of the Pacific Northwest. While out exploring one afternoon, I pulled into a scenic overlook. A historic marker had been placed, and I read the following. In 1912, Charles W. and Helena Parker established a summer home here at Mitchell Point. With the construction of the Columbia River Highway and the Mitchell Point Tunnel, the Parker property became a one-of-a-kind landmark. Motorists from across the country stopped here to enjoy the river views and the Tunnel of Many Vistas, which it had become known as. In the early 1930s, Elsie Babe Tenney, a single mother from Oklahoma, bought the Parker property. A savvy and hardworking businesswoman, Babe ran a grill, a service station, a roadhouse, and rental cabins, all the while raising two sons. Throughout Prohibition and the Great Depression, Babe's tourist stop earned a reputation as a place to cast away cares and woes. Here you could enjoy a hearty meal, Lindy Hop to a great band from Portland, and rent a room for the night. Rumor has it the moonshine may have turned things up a bit. Standing in this spot today, almost 100 years later, I felt a sort of longing, actually. A time I missed out on, maybe. All this natural beauty combined with human ingenuity and elbow grease. It's likely no less impressive to look at it today, but I somehow know it must have felt much better to live it than to just look at it. I almost wish I could have had one of Babe's hearty home-cooked meals, and wish I could have heard that music. I wish I could have seen those high-spirited Lindy dancers taking a swig from a moonshine jug. I don't know, maybe, I guess, in a way, just being here where they were, maybe I kind of did hear it. I know I felt it. And when not out exploring, you'd catch us hanging out here on the banks of the river watching the tugboats and fishermen glide by. And it even got better when the windsurfers showed up. Here's another example of right time, right place. I certainly know what windsurfing is, but I certainly did not know how popular it was. I also did not know that as we drove into the Columbia River Gorge, we were also driving into the windsurfing capital of the world. Turns out the gorge offers ideal conditions for windsurfers of all levels. The Columbia River Gorge acts as a natural wind tunnel, creating consistent and strong winds. These winds attract surfers from around the globe, making it a haven for wind junkies. The windsurfing craze began in the late 1970s and played a pivotal role in bringing hundreds of windsurfers from beginners to experts to the gorge. Even startup companies like Windsurfing Hawaii, Chinook, Slingshot, Sailworks, and Dynafiber all moved to the gorge for product development. The windy Columbia River Gorge provided an ideal environment for research and design. I also did not know that windsurfing dates all the way back to the 40s. It didn't really take off until the 80s, and it became an Olympic event in 1984. Today, 23 million people enjoy the sport globally, and around 1.5 of them are in the United States. The gorge is far and away the top spot in the U.S. for windsurfers, but it's popular across the country as well, in spots like Padre Island, Texas, the Outer Banks of North Carolina, the San Francisco Bay, and even the north side of Maui in Hawaii. We would stumble onto, or maybe land in the middle of, is a better way to say it, when one afternoon our quiet spot on the Rufus Landing recreation area turned into a parking lot. The car started pulling in. At one point, I counted over 50 vehicles, everything from RVs decked out to stay for a while to vans, pickups, cars, anything you could put a rack on, it was there. It was a fun afternoon, and again the next day, watching folks take to the skies. Made me kind of want to give it a try. On our last evening here, I also read that in 1986, just under 300,000 acres along the gorge were designated as a natural scenic area. This designation provides protection from many types of development in the area, preserving it and its history and beauty for generations to come. The next morning, we'd pull back out onto the interstate and head east. We didn't get very far up the road when I saw a sign that said Blue Mountain Scenic Highway. Ooh, I wonder what we'll learn there. Turns out, this thing called life comes with a lot of rules. Maybe it's time to break a few. Because you can. No, seriously, you can.